In 1949, a man named Asa Combs in Letcher County, Kentucky, rehung a sagging barn door using a single block of hickory he had cut and dried in his own loft. He shaped a new wooden pin by hand, soaked it in boiled linseed oil, and drove it home with the heel of his palm. That door swung true for 53 years. In 2003, his grandson replaced the rusted-out steel hinge on the same barn with a galvanized kit from the hardware store. It failed in 4 winters. The hickory pin Asa carved still sits in a coffee can on that workbench, harder than the day he made it. And nobody left on that ridge remembers how he cut it. They did not fix things because it was charming. They fixed things because the mountain did not sell replacements. When something broke, you studied it and made it work with what the hollow gave you: wood, ash, tallow, stone. But here is the part we forgot in trading that away. We did not just lose the skills, we lost the plain fact underneath them. The old fix was usually better, stronger, longer lasting than the shrink-wrapped part that replaced it. We were told the new way was an upgrade. Most of the time it was a downgrade we paid for twice. Number 24 waterproofs a pair of work boots better than any spray sold today, and it costs nothing but what is already in the kitchen. Number 16 held a cracked iron skillet together for 40 years, a skillet the maker warrantied for one. And number 6, the joint every mountain carpenter cut by hand, is stronger than the screws and steel brackets a contractor now charges $300 to install, because it never relies on metal that can rust. These 30 tricks were not about being handy. They were about being able, the mountain word for a person who could answer any broken thing with their own 2 hands. That ability did not come from a store. It came from having no store to go to. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 30 lost hillbilly fix-it tricks that still outperform anything on the hardware store shelf. Number 30, hanging a tool on a hickory handle. A bad handle was worse than no tool. You split straight hickory along the grain, shaved it to your grip, and drove a wedge to swell it tight. A boy in Perry County, Kentucky in 1947 was not grown until he hung his own axe head. Fiberglass promises it never breaks, and the hickory one outlasted the man who hung it. Number 29, finishing wood with beeswax and linseed oil. Before varnish reached the mountains, 2 kitchen things kept furniture alive. You warmed boiled linseed oil, shaved in beeswax, and rubbed the paste into the bare grain until the wood drank no more. A farm wife in Greene County, Tennessee, did this in 1931, and her table was still smooth 60 years on. Polyurethane peels in 10 years, and this soaked in and renewed forever. Number 28, sealing a seam with pine pitch. When a bucket leaked, no mountain man reached for a tube. You melted hardened pine sap in a can, then brushed the boiling sap into the seam, pressing the wood tight as it cooled glass hard. For a cooper in Watauga County, North Carolina in the 1920s, pitch decided whether a bucket held water or held nothing. Silicone cracks loose in a few freezes, but the pitch flexed and held for decades. Number 27, cutting grease with wood ash la wae. The hardest grease met its match in last night's cold ashes. You poured rainwater through packed hardwood ashes and caught the brown lye strong enough to strip grime no soap would touch. A grandmother in Harlan County, Kentucky in 1936 made it strong enough to float an egg. A store degreaser runs out by spring. The fireplace gave the same thing for free. Number 26, lashing a repair with wet rawhide. When a handle cracked, the strongest bandage was green hide. You soaked the rawhide soft, wrapped the break tight, and let it dry down to iron. A teamster in southern West Virginia in 1918 saved a wagon tongue this way, 40 miles from a blacksmith. A steel band rusts and lets go. Rawhide only got tighter with age. Number 25, gluing with hide glue. The strongest joint in an old chair was held by glue cooked from scraps. You warmed the chips until they ran like honey, brushed it hot into the joint, and clamped fast. A chairmaker in Madison County, North Carolina in 1928 prized what bottled glue threw away. Steam released it clean for the next repair. The old chair comes apart clean. The new one splinters. Number 24, waterproofing boots with tallow and beeswax. Dry feet in a wet winter were how a man kept all 10 toes. You melted beeswax into rendered tallow and worked the warm paste deep into every seam of your boots. For a logger in McDowell County, West Virginia in 1939, this meant crossing a frozen creek to camp and arriving dry. A spray quits in a week, and this dubbin kept leather dry for years. Number 23, browning steel to stop rust. A mountain man turned rust itself into armor. You swabbed bare steel with vinegar and salt, let a fine rust bloom, then carded it back with steel wool day after day into a deep brown skin. A gunsmith in Sevier County, Tennessee in 1912 browned rifles that survived 2 generations of wet seasons. Rust spray flakes off the first bump. This surface was made permanent. Number 22, stopping a faucet drip with leather. Before a rubber washer cost a dime, old leather did it better. You pulled the valve stem, cut a leather disc the size of the seat, oiled it, and seated it. For a widow in Knox County, Kentucky in 1954, fixing it herself proved she could keep her own house standing. Plumbers now charge $300 for what a nickel of leather fixed in 4 minutes. Number 21, chinking a wall with lime and clay. Cabin log gaps were never sealed from a tube. You mixed slaked lime, sand, and clay with horsehair into a stiff mud and packed it deep into the chinks by hand. For a homesteading couple in Wise County, Virginia in the 1890s, the autumn chinking decided a warm winter or a deadly one. Foam shrinks and lets the wind in, lime chinking hardens with age, and outlived the Civil War. Here is something no one is tracking. The youngest people who grew up in a hollow where everything was fixed by hand are now in their 80s. They are the last living link to a way of being that needed no store and no permission. When they go, the information survives. You can still find most of it in a book. What dies with them is the instinct, the hands that knew, by feel, when a joint was true and when it was about to fail. That confidence was not taught in a class. It was built into a person by 10,000 mornings of standing next to someone built the same way. A boy watched his father dress a boot. A girl watched her mother test the lye with an egg. The knowing passed hand to hand, the way warmth passes. That chain is breaking on every ridge in this country right now, and we are not replacing it with anything. Number 20, putting a true edge on a creek stone. A shop that sold a stone might be a day's walk away. You found a flat, fine-grained stone in the stream bed, wet it, and worked the blade in slow circles until it shaved arm hair. An old man in Buncombe County, North Carolina in 1950 sharpened his father's knife this way and never bought another. Disposable blades get tossed. An edge raised on stone comes back forever. Number 19, reseating a chair with an oak splint seat. When a chair bottom gave out, you rewove the bones of the old one. You rived thin strips of green-white oak, soaked them limp, and wove them tight so they dried drum-hard. A chair bottomer in Jackson County, Kentucky, in 1933 reseated chairs for $1 or a meal, and they still hold weight. A store seat sags in a year. The oak splint carried grown men for 40. Number 18, filling a gouge with sawdust and glue. A scratch in good wood did not need filler that never matched. You mixed fine sawdust from that very board with hot hide glue and pressed it in, so it took stain and aged the same. A cabinet maker's apprentice in 1941 kept labeled dust jars so the right dust made the wound vanish. Store filler dries the wrong color and pops out cold. This was the wood healing itself. Number 17, freeing a stuck door with a candle. In a damp hollow, doors swelled shut by July. You found the worn spot where the wood bound, and you rubbed a tallow candle hard along it until the door slid clean. A mother in a mountain hollow in 1948 kept a candle stub in every room for exactly this. When a spray runs out and grabs grit, a nub of candle did the job for years and never dried up. Number 16, patching a cracked iron skillet with tin. A cracked skillet needed one more lifetime, not the trash. You cleaned the crack to bright metal, brushed flux, and flowed solder into it, sometimes with a thin tin patch behind. A traveling tinker in 1925 made his living this way, and one skillet he mended fried eggs for 40 more years. The maker warrantied it 1 year, and a hot iron gave it 40. Number 15, easing a screw with soap. Long before a blue and yellow can, a dry bar of soap did this. You dragged the threads across the soap before driving, and the screw bit clean instead of stripping. A carpenter in 1937 kept a bar in his nail apron because soap never soaked in to ruin a finish. A spray oil stains the wood. The soap did it dry, clean, and free. Number 14, tightening a loose tool head with water. A wobbling hammer head meant the wood was thirsty, not finished. You stood the tool, head down, in a bucket of water overnight, and the dry handle swelled inside the eye and locked tight. For a farm boy in 1944, being handed that bucket meant being handed responsibility. A man today buys a new tool over a wobble. The old fix cost a night's wait. Number 13, staining wood with steel wool and vinegar. The deepest gray-black on mountain furniture came from a jar of rust. You soaked steel wool in vinegar for days, then brushed the liquid onto bare oak, where the iron darkened the wood from the inside out. A thrifty wife in 1935 made plain pine match walnut she could not afford. Store stain sits on top and fades. This color was grown into the wood. Number 12, patching a roof with tar paper and pitch. A leak over the bed did not wait for a roofer. You overlapped the leak with tar paper, bedded it in hot pitch, and pressed it into one black waterproof skin. For a coal camp family in 1930, the company did not fix roofs, so the father did with materials begged from the tipple. A store patch lifts in one summer. The hot pitch patch held 20 winters. Number 11, greasing a hinge with rendered fat. A squeaking door sent you to the smokehouse, not the store. You worked a fingertip of goose grease or lard into the pin, and the heavy fat clung where thin oil ran off. For a farm wife in 1929, it was the same fat she rendered every hog killing. Spray lube flashes off by spring. Animal fat stayed quiet for a year. In 2019, the European Union estimated that planned obsolescence, building things to fail or to be unfixable, costs consumers an extra $175 billion a year worldwide. The home repair and maintenance industry in this country alone now pulls in over $600 billion annually. That entire river of money depends on one thing: you not knowing how to do what the man in this video did with his hands and a jar of vinegar. In 1950, the average household spent close to nothing on professional home repair. By 2023, that figure passed $3,000 a year. The houses did not get harder to fix. The people inside them were sold the idea that they could not, then sold the part, then sold the service. The old fix was not just cheaper, it was better. And that is exactly why no one is teaching it. Number 10, straightening a bent nail. Throwing a nail away was nearer a sin than a habit. You laid it flat on a stone and tapped it true, a quarter turn between strokes, then kept it in a coffee can. For a depression carpenter in 1934, that can started every job before he opened a new box. This was the instinct the wartime posters printed. Use it up, wear it out, make it do. Number 9, whittling a replacement part by hand. When no store stocked the part, a man cut one with his pocket knife. You found seasoned hardwood, studied the broken piece, and shaved a match, checking the fit until it seated clean. For a grandfather in 1952, the pocket knife was a workshop in a pants pocket that could conjure a chair rung from firewood. He did not search a catalog. He made the part the catalog forgot. Number 8, bending wood green instead of breaking it dry. A curve started as a green limb you persuaded, not a part you bought. You cut the wood fresh, steamed it limber, bent it around a form, and let it dry, locked in that shape. For a sled maker in 1922, this curved the runners and wrapped the barrel hoops. A store bracket cracks at the bend, but green wood grew strong in the curve. Number 7, clinching a nail for an unbreakable joint. When a joint had to hold no matter what, a man trapped the nail. You drove it longer than the boards were thick, then bent the point flat back into the wood so it could never back out. For a boat builder in 1910, every seam was clinched because a loose nail was a sunk boat. A screw backs out and a bracket shears, but a clinched nail cannot pull free. Number 6, joining wood with a wooden peg. The strongest joint in a barn used no steel at all. You bored a hole through the timbers, drove an oversized oak peg, and let it swell tight with every season. For a timber framer in 1900, the peg was cut from the dense heart of the oak to stand 100 years. A contractor now charges $300 in hardware for a joint. A peg does better. Number 5, daubing a wall with clay and straw. A crack in the plaster needed mud, done right, not a product. You dug stiff clay from the creek bank, worked in straw and a little lime, and packed it into the gap to dry hard and breathing. For a homesteader in 1915, this same daub built the whole cat and clay chimney. A tube patch falls out in a year. The clay daub held for decades. Number 4, roofing with hand-split shakes. A roof came off an oak log, not a truck. You set a froe on the end grain, struck it with a maul, and rived thin shakes along the grain so water shed off unbroken fibers. For a froe man in 1905, a day's work made a roof's worth, traded to roof a neighbor. An asphalt shingle dies in 15 years. A split oak shake roof lasted 60. Number 3, resoling a boot with scrap leather. A worn sole started a boot's second life, not its retirement. You cut a new sole from old harness, then stitched it on with waxed thread through all holes, stitched, not glued, so it held in the wet. For a thrifty father in 1932, half-soling the family's boots was as normal as mending socks. Store boots fall apart at the glue line in months. The stitched sole held. Number 2. Reading a problem by sound. The best diagnostic tool in the mountains was a trained ear. You tapped the timber and listened. A solid ring meant sound wood. A dull thud meant hidden rot. An old carpenter in the 1940s could name the soft joist in a sagging porch without lifting a board. No store tester finds trouble faster than an ear that heard 10,000 boards. Number 1, looking at the broken thing before you do anything else. That is the whole skill. Before a trip to the store, before a phone call, before spending a single dime. The able man walked up to the broken thing and looked. He touched it, moved the parts, found what was loose, what was worn, what had shifted out of true, and let his hands tell him what his eyes had missed. Most of the time the problem was small, and the answer was already in the room. For every grandfather and grandmother in these mountains, this was the first instinct and the deepest one, taught to children not with words, but by doing it 10,000 times where they could watch. This was not expertise, it was attention, the refusal to believe a broken thing was beyond you until you had looked it dead in the eye. None of these 30 tricks needed a store. None needed a certificate, a kit, or a credit card. They needed a person willing to look closely at a broken thing and believe, without anyone's permission, that they could make it work again and make it work better than the thing the store would sell to replace it. That belief was once the default setting of every home in these mountains. It was confidence born of having no other road down the hollow, and it produced people whose repairs outlasted the men and women who made them. We did not lose to the hardware store because its parts were better. We know now that most of them were worse. We lost because we stopped believing our own hands could answer the question. The tools are still in the barn. The pine still bleeds pitch. The hickory still grows on the ridge. What went quiet was the voice that stood beside a 10-year-old, put a tool in small hands and said, "Come here, watch close. I will only show you this once."